2019 City Planning Commission meeting. We'll begin our meeting with a roll call.
Commissioner Milstein.
Here.
Commissioner Mills. Commissioner Gibb Randall. Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Briggs.
Here.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Here.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Here.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Here.
Commissioner Woods. We have a quorum of 6 members that would take affirmative votes from all members to advance any petitions.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Commissioner Briggs, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. Any comments, changes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It is approved. Introductions. Do we have any introductions this evening? We do not. Minutes of previous meetings. We don't have any minutes of previous meetings. And we are at reports from City Administration, City Council, Planning Manager, Planning Commission officers and committees, written communications, and petition. We'll start with City Council. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, a nice early morning release from City Council. About 7 items for your attention from that City Council meeting related to the UDC amendments revolving temporary outdoor activity and car storage. You'll remember our conversation around Briarwood Mall. Those amendments to the Unified Development Code were approved at second reading. Amendments to the UDC around mobile food vending or food trucks on private property were approved at second reading. At first reading, front porch setbacks. This is a conversation that came to us by way of the Zoning Board of Appeals, were approved at first reading. Moving to site-specific items, 1448 Warrington Drive was rezoned to single parcel, formerly township. Bristol Ridge off Pontiac Trail, the site plan was approved by City Council. 841 Broadway, or the DTE, the Mishcon site, was approved at first reading. The area plan attached to the PUD, which is an exciting development. And finally, the Bright Dawn development on Burton Road off Packard was denied, rezoning to R4D. Right. That's my update.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard, do you have a report for us this evening?
I do not.
Planning Commission officers and committees? Anyone? Anyone? All right. And then written communications and petitions. We have one item in written communication that we received, and it's in our packet this evening. All right, audience participation. At this time, anybody in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to an item that is not on the agenda, you may step up to the podium and you'll have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission on an item that is not on our agenda for this evening.
Thank you so much. As I always say at these meetings, I hope you will use your microphones. I am having some difficulty hearing you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the Planning Commission regarding an item that is not on the agenda this evening? All right, seeing no one, we'll move on to public hearings scheduled for the next business meeting.
We have one new public hearing scheduled for the June 18th Planning Commission meeting. It is 2857 Packard Road, Planned Unit Development, Site Plan for City Council Approval. A request to rezone the site from R1E, Single Family Dwelling District to Planned Unit Development to allow for 25 single family homes and 26 townhome units. You will recall that this is a petition that had previously been conditionally rezoned with an area plan and was denied at the site plan level. The petitioner is now seeking a planned unit development application.
Thank you. Moving on to number 9, unfinished business. Before us this evening is a petition to amend Chapter 55 Unified Development Code for City Council approval to allow restaurants, bar, and food service in the Office O zoning district under certain conditions, such as where there is already a large office building. We will begin with a staff report, and we will head on to Ms. Delio.
Thank you. As mentioned, this is a proposed amendment to Chapter 55 Unified Development Code. It is an amendment to the office district. I'll go closer. Okay. An owner and manager of several office developments in town submitted a petition to amend the UDC to allow restaurants in office districts. And their suggestion or their request was to allow restaurants on large lots, perhaps 4 acres or more, with at least 100 or maybe 200,000 square feet of office use. We held a public hearing about that on March 18th. But this body voted to postpone it and discuss it at a working session, which we did on April 9th. At the working session, the Planning Commission asked that the amendment allow restaurants in proportion to the lot size throughout the office district. And we were referencing some of the other caps on accessory uses that are present in other districts. So the amendment that we have are coming back to you is to amend the permitted use table, which is section 515, table 5-15, to add an A in the accessory restaurant, bar, and food service, to add an A in the office column. And then to amend the use-specific standards, which is section 516.3L. Number 1 in that section already it talks about the use-specific standards when you have retail in a manufacturing district. So inserting, no, I think I have it wrong, but pressing on. Inserting at number 2, the use-specific standards for an accessory restaurant. An accessory means you must first have an office use. Then, when you have an established office use, you can have this accessory restaurant. The accessory restaurant can be 10% of the total floor area of the site, but not to exceed 12,000 square feet. Drive-through facilities for the restaurant, bar, and food service use are prohibited. Curb cuts and driveway approaches to the site comply with the number of openings provided in a different section of the code. What this means is reinforcing that you cannot get any additional curb cuts just because there are multiple uses on the site. But if you have enough frontage, you could have an additional curb cut if you meet the curb cut criteria. And then finally, for off-street parking purposes, the restaurant, bar, food service use shall be considered general office, and referring back to the off-street parking table. The general office use lines up almost exactly, not quite, but almost exactly with the shopping center use, as opposed to considering it a freestanding restaurant. By doing this, we are making the assumption that there will be shared parking, that some of the office users of that very site would be patronizing the restaurant, and even perhaps maybe other office or other uses nearby. We are not assuming that every single customer of the restaurant will be coming in their own personal vehicle. And so these are the proposed amendments, the amended amendments for your approval. Staff is recommending approval.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing. If anybody in the audience wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this item, you may step up to the podium, state your name and your name and address for the record, and address the Planning Commission. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and I will read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the Mayor and City Council approve the amendments to Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Section 5.15 and 5.16 to allow restaurant, bar, and food service use in the O Office District and provide use-specific standards. Do you have a commissioner that will move? Moved by Commissioner Briggs, seconded by Commissioner Weatherby. We are in discussion. Are we ready to vote? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It is approved. All right, moving on to regular business. Before us this evening, we have 2793 Plymouth Road Special Use Exemption use and site plan for City Planning Commission approval. Mr. Leonard.
Yeah, before we start on this petition, I want to update the planning commission. You will note the staff report recommends postponement. As we've discussed before, we are constantly trying to manage timing of petitions and agendas. This particular petition I thought was close to full approval by all technical reviewers. We published it. Since that time, I've learned that there is an outstanding review that has not been completed and signed off. So therefore, until we resolve that outstanding issue, I'm requesting that Planning Commission hold the public hearing as advertised, but then I would recommend movement to postpone until we've completed the staff technical review of the petition.
Great. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this petition. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission? Seeing,
This is the Plymouth Road issue.
correct.
Thank you.
Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And I will,
You still have to read the motion. That'll be the longest part of our conversation.
I actually think it would be appropriate to just move to postpone action on 2793 until review is complete.
okay,
So moved.
moved, and it's seconded by Commissioner Briggs.
I also have a question.
Commissioner
This
Briggs.
is appropriate. Since we did receive, this is the one thing that we received public comment on, I was just wondering that we received a letter indicating that there were challenges with congestion at certain times and unsafe conditions, primarily like from parents who were maybe accessing services in that area for their kids. I don't know if that is something, I assume that's something that'll be covered in the report, but maybe just a heads up that that is something to address a little bit.
Yeah, we
more
can
when it
make sure
comes to
that's addressed in the eventual staff report.
Okay.
And we will also endeavor to notify anybody that we receive communications on once it's rescheduled of that rescheduled date.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Ackerman.
I'll note also, we approved a special exemption use for medical marijuana also, just a few thousand yards to the west on Plymouth, the old Bagel Friggle location. And there were also traffic and turning movement concerns there. And just anything we learned from that, if we could now apply just to the east, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a reminder, this petition has previously received a provisioning center special exception use. This is a
That's right.
proposed expansion of that. So, but absolutely,
Thank
we'll
you.
make sure that that's looked at.
Any further discussion? All right, let's vote on the postponement. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It is postponed. Next item is amendments to City of Ann Arbor Code, Chapter 55, Unified Development Code for City Council approval, Section 5.17.4, to correct an error in the dimensional standards table, Section 5.17.6, to change the primary street designation setback requirements, and Section 5.18.6 to change the premium options, including other sections as necessary to cross-reference and administer the proposed changes. We'll begin with the staff report, and we'll head over to Ms. DeLeo.
Thank you. I will mention, and I will get into it, the public hearing was advertised for 3 different changes to the city code. We are only recommending 2 changes to the city code. The ones regarding the building frontage and the frontage setbacks, we are not proposing any changes at this time. If you will recall, a few months ago, we had other corrections and a change to the city code. Since we're back again, I have named our files, that was alpha, and this would be beta. So if anyone is referring to, remember when we did some changes to city code, I'm now referring to them as the alpha group and the beta group. Perhaps there'll be a gamma group, I don't know. However, we are proposing some amendments to the UDC. First up, we have a correction to the dimensional standards table in the mixed use zoning category. Specifically, the error is specifically with the C3 district. That cell for C3 maximum front setback has no dimension and references footnotes B, C, and G, which is incorrect. It should indicate 25 feet and reference footnote A. Also, the cells for maximum front setback for C1, C1B, and C2B incorrectly don't reference footnote A. So we have corrected that table. Also, we've proposed to remove some redundant and duplicate references in the footnotes and to move some of the footnote standards into the table just for clarity and efficiency. But those I would not say are substantive changes, those are formatting changes. Our second amendment is to the premium options. This would be a change, not a correction. You may recall City Council passed a resolution in March that requested recommendations from the Planning Commission to increase the public benefit created by the affordable housing premium with the goal of increasing the number of units or payments into the affordable housing fund. Council asked the Planning Commission to examine things as requiring the use of downtown affordable housing premiums to access other premiums, reducing the utility of the residential housing premium, which would encourage use of other premiums, and reduce the parking requirements for the affordable housing premium. As staff, we brainstormed this. We discussed this with the Planning Commission back in April. And we have come up with a recommendation to combine the residential use premium and the existing affordable housing premium and combine them and call it the affordable residential use premium. And we will be offering three options. If a developer is committed to 15% of all the dwelling units in the building, we will give them a 150% lot area bonus in the D1 district or 100% in the D2. If they commit to 20% of all the dwelling units are affordable in the project, in the D1 district, we'll give them a 300% floor area, lot area bonus. In the D2 district, a 200%. And if 30% of all the dwelling units are affordable, in the D1 district, they can get a 500% floor area bonus. These amounts equal the current premium maximums. Right now, you can get up to 700% in the D1 using residential use, and 400 plus 300 is 700. In the D2, you can get up to 400% floor area ratio with premiums, and in the D2, 200 is 400%. And we offer the super premium in the D2, in the D1, up to 900%, and that's where the 500% comes in. And what this will likely look like is on the left there is a building. This is not to scale, but it's a little proportional. The building is 400%, it would have 400% FAR. That's a normal building. Any combination of uses can go in that building. I've taken a site on South University, the size of the site, and the number of units that it proposed, and extrapolated that out just for discussion purposes. So we can have a hypothetical building of 66,000 square feet. It might have 20 dwelling units in it, all market rate. It's 400% FAR. It uses no premiums. It's a by right project. The next building in, moving from left to right, that building would have that developer has said, I will commit to 15% affordable units. So we have increased his maximum FAR or her maximum FAR to 550%. If they build a building taking full advantage of that, that would be a 90,750 square foot building. Might have about 35 apartments in it, including 5 affordable units. Next building would be a 700% FAR building. They would have committed to 20% affordable units to earn that additional 300% chunk. That building might be 115,500 square feet, have about 45 units in it, including 6 affordable units. And if the developer was willing to make 30% of all the units in a building affordable, their premium would be capped at 900% FAR. It would be about a 148,500 square foot building, including 60 units with 9 affordable units. This is what we think would be the most likely scenario. The main difference in concept from what our current premium program is and what is proposed, our current program, you sort of click your way up, and every square foot of residential use you provide, you get a bonus square foot or fraction of square foot, and you just click your way up. And it's very difficult to or anticipate it's very difficult to answer the question, how much premium can I earn? And I said, I can't tell you how much you can earn. I can tell you if your full development program, if you can achieve what you want. You have to tell me how much residential you want, and I will tell you how much premium you are awarded. And so it's a 1-for-1, and you just click your way up until you reach then the hard cap of the FAR. This is more of the model that we use for the green building premium. If you provide a thing, and in this case, the thing is percentage of affordable. If you provide a thing, I will just simply raise your FAR cap. And then you are free to do work within that cap. So you can anticipate and you can perhaps better plan out your development program, knowing what your amenity is and then what your FAR cap is. And we think these are probably the most likely scenarios. As you know, we get mostly residential buildings with a little bit of first floor or second floor commercial. Most new projects in the downtown lean heavily toward the residential. But with this new scenario, I would like to point out for transparency that there are some unlikely scenarios. And what we could get is for the 550% FAR, you could get for that 90,750 square foot building, 90,500 square feet of it could be office, and they could provide one 250 square foot affordable unit. That is more than 15%. That's actually 100% of all the units. So it would be mostly an office. It could be mostly an office building with one affordable unit in it. And I've gone through sort of unlikely scenarios for the other. With 700% FAR, you could get basically a hotel with one affordable unit and maybe one penthouse condo. With a 900% FAR building, you might get, again, a very large office use with one affordable unit, one market rate. And percentage-wise, all of those have at least 15 or 20 or 30% affordable units. I don't think the market is going this way, and I also don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if a building was all office. There has been some comments over the years that we should be incentivizing office. In all cases, we are getting affordable units, whereas currently we're not getting any. So, and like we mentioned, the market doesn't seem to be going this way, but this type of scenario would be allowed. And finally, wrapping it up, it is not in the proposed ordinance, but we would suggest that you recommend also a change to the parking standards. Section 519.3, which is the special parking district, paragraph A says, paraphrased, no parking is required for the floor area of normal FAR, and one space is required for each 1,000 square feet of premium floor area. Recommend a further amendment to say, continue saying no parking required for the floor area of normal FAR, or, and this would be the amendment, floor area used for affordable housing units, and then one space is required for each square foot of premium floor area. I am happy to answer any questions about the correction or the premium amendments, but as staff, we are recommending approval.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this item?
Hi, I'm Karen White, 2719 Cranbrook Road. I'm interested in your discussion. I need a definition of the term FAR, and it would be also helpful to know what you mean by affordable. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ethel Potts, And I'm here to complain about the amount of information available to the public. You know, I look online, your motion is there. Frankly, you should not pass that motion. Your motion should contain the specifics that you are actually dealing with. Definitions and dimensions and so forth should be in your motion. It shouldn't say vague general things like change the setback. Change it from what to what, and for what and your discussion will tell us for what reason we want to change the setback, or what premium options are being changed, and your discussion will tell us why they're being changed. So none of this is available online. I have to either come to a meeting or have to go to City Hall to the department to pick up a copy of what it is. Sorry about that, but I'm interested, and I'm only tonight getting the information that I would like to have had a week ago. Do you actually know what these setbacks mean and what they will do for you or against you? And changing the premium options. One of the underlying problems with premiums, and I've said this before, is that we give a very generous premium for housing. And that's what developers come to town to do. That's their job, to make housing, to build housing. So we reward them for it by giving them extra floor area, and what the end result of that is that no other premiums are used. And we would like some of the other premiums to be used sometimes, not just more and more and more housing. But you consider whether or not we're defeating our own intentions with premiums by being so generous with housing premiums. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Alan Haber. Just hearing this discussion on premiums in behalf of affordable housing, it would seem to me, given the amount of attention on affordable housing and the concern that this is essentially an emergency, that the amount of affordable housing for which quite substantial premiums and increases in size are given, it should be, 15% should be like 30% and 20% like 40% and, and so on. Double that. Indicate that really if you want to have any extra appreciation from the city for more size, which gives you more opportunity for more profit, then put a more substantial amount of your resource into the affordable housing part. So I would hope you'd look at that, what those premiums are, and multiply them by some significant factor, both to indicate that you recognize affordable housing as a substantial question and that you want to do something in a clear way. I offer that thought.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission? All right, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the amendments to Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Section 5.17.4, Table 5:17-4, mixed-use zoning district dimensions to correct an error and clarify the requirements. In Section 5.18.6, premiums to incentivize affordable dwelling units in the downtown zoning district. Moved by Commissioner Ackerman, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to staff for your work on this. So just to clarify, this is in response to council resolution directing us to look at downtown housing premiums? The coupling with the correction, was that just for ease of getting it to the council table?
Convenience.
Convenience, okay. Well, hopefully that'll work in your favor. Part
of your recommendation is if you deem it, if this body deems it appropriate, we can of course split it before it progresses to planning commission, or to city council.
I think I would certainly be interested in that. I think it just adds distraction to the conversation. You know, one is correcting a scrivener's error, and to Ms. Potts' question, the impact of the setbacks. When we transitioned from our Chapter 55 zoning code, which is much more traditional zoning code, to the Unified Development Code, which is much more modernized, this seems as though it was an inadvertent error in which an incorrect number was copied over to the new version, and this is a correction to the original intent of the law. So the impact of setbacks would not be anything out of what we expect to see in the C3 commercial fringe zoning district. But I do think that's a very separate conversation from the downtown premiums. Turning to the downtown premiums, for context in the audience, in 2010, the original set of downtown premiums were adopted. And to Ms. Potts' point again, we put a heavy incentive on building residential. At that time, there wasn't a lot of residential in our downtown, and that really seemed to be what we wanted to encourage. And at that time, that made sense. As we're now in 2019 and things have changed, we're noticing that most of the buildings being built are at least 90% residential. So that leaves us with the question, how do we then instead encourage and incentivize the type of development we want to see, or the mix of income that we want to see in these developments, which spurred a council resolution directing Planning Commission to take a look at exactly that. This is the first that's coming back to define floor area ratio for you. That's a unit of density. That's really how we measure density in our zoning code, and it's how we communicate the majority of our premiums. Not all of them, some of them are in square footage, which can get confusing, but it's the primary unit we use to measure density. It's a ratio of what your buildable lot area is to how much you're stacking on top of it.
I might, if I could just clarify, I think it's probably better to describe it as a massing.
Okay.
Because when I think it's a density of square footage, but I think generally when I think of density, I think probably of residential density. And I think floor area ratio, to be clear, could apply to, it's a square footage, it's a massing calculation relative to the lot size.
Fair.
So just as an easy example, if 100% of FAR would be building a comparable amount of square footage as the lot area, 200% FAR would be building a comparable amount that doubles the square footage of the lot area. So imagine the entire lot from boundary to boundary, 2 stories would be 200% and 300%. Or if you could have 100% FAR, which is 1 story boundary to boundary, or a 2-story building on only half of the parcel. So it's a massing measurement.
So as we look around our downtown and we see a lot of the college residential rental buildings, those are about 700 FAR. So to give you a sense. Yep, absolutely. So we are now taking a look at how do we limit the benefit of what was a premium in 2010 that made sense, and instead incentivize some more construction of affordable housing downtown. And there are questions around what does affordable mean? This is the first time we're getting some concrete numbers back. It's mostly been brainstorming to date. So I'm just going to run through a list of questions if I could. I want to, I guess, first jump on lower income is capitalized. Is that a definition defined in the UDC? And is that 60% and below?
It is defined. It is 80% and below.
80%.
I'm under the impression that separate amendments are working their way through to change that definition to 60%.
Got it. We also measure, affordability as a ratio of income. The median income was and we measure it at the county level, not the city level. So it's actually a little lower, fortunately. It was $59,000, but I think it's gone up drastically. And I don't know how often we update what that AMI number is used to calculate.
It's typically updated on an annual basis.
Okay. So as Ann Arbor becomes more affluent, that has effect on the area median income of the county. We may want to revisit those calculations as well, or even determine if area median income is the right unit to measure off of. But that's a whole other conversation. I think this is good steps in the right directions. I just want to work through that. So glad lower income is a defined term. Sounds like we're moving it from 80 to 60. 60 is kind of where all of our goals are. 60% of $60,000. So what is that, $36,000 a year? It would be affordable to that person, so 30% of their income. So a lot of ratios on top of ratios. So getting it back into the questions, can you talk us through the methodology of how these numbers were developed? Kind of what are, as we go through the increased massing or density, how we landed on them?
They were drawn from what we incentivize or what we require in the PUD for a PUD. So those are numbers that we already have in our code. And they can be further changed. The proposal can be changed, but staff drew our starting point from where we already what we already asked for when we do PUDs.
And what's, so that's to say if there's a residential PUD, if they want to get certain amounts of density, they have to provide certain amounts of affordable residential housing?
Right.
Okay. And what's been our success over the last 20 years in capturing these kinds of units with, I guess, how long have these numbers been in our PUD ordinance?
They've been in the ordinance for quite a while. I can think of one PUD right off the top of my head that it proposed an increase in density and has affordable units in it. That would be the Ashley Muse PUD. I'd have to think a little bit more about other PUDs that may or may not have used this. Also, there are a good number of PUDs that don't have any residential component. An unrealized PUD that used this was the Broadway Village PUD, and it had 20% affordable, but it was never constructed, and it's since been rezoned. That PUD has basically been nullified. That is now a conventional district.
So, okay, I appreciate that. My concern is we haven't seen a lot of successful residential PUDs move through. I guess Lockwood would have been one. It didn't move forward. But that wasn't an issue of market constraints. That was a council decision. Has staff assessed those numbers to see how viable they'll be in the market? Have we talked to the building community, the local building community, to see how these numbers jive? I realize we're on a tight timeline, but these seem like important.
Yeah.
Stopping development isn't the goal of this proposal. The goal of this proposal is to allow development, but to incentivize diverse incomes in our downtown.
We did not reach out to the development community for any focus groups or task forces. We are relying a little bit on this public hearing process to see if anyone came forward. We can reach out to the contacts that we do have. But as you mentioned, to keep on the timeline, we put forth a our best effort of a recommendation. It can be further vetted.
I guess so. I'd turn to Mr. Leonard. What would you?
And I guess I would tack on to that I don't have any better, more comprehensive data about past PUDs, but my sense is that there were several, mostly pre-recession, that were never realized. That there were a couple of other PUDs that were never realized for a variety of reasons. I would say that since that time, very recently, we have had community experience with a series of project proposals that would suggest to me, in the case of Lockwood, for example, that is not a barrier from market viability in order to achieve those kind of levels. So that at least answers potentially the question as it relates to the 15 and 20%. My instinct is if the market would support those at that location, there's probably more offsetting revenue possibility in the downtown districts.
Okay, I appreciate that, Reed. I appreciate that, Reed. I would love to shop it out some, just to get some feedback. Also, I would just hope that, you know, like you can have an open line to me, and if you need an extension on the timeline, the point of the timeline wasn't to create a bad ordinance, it was just to get the process moving.
I don't think this is a bad ordinance.
Okay.
But
That wasn't my implication.
But yeah, and I would I appreciate that, and I would say to the full planning commission, we have to report back to the city council. I've already communicated to the city administration office that I anticipate a status memo at least being provided by the next city council meeting on June 17th.
Okay.
My instinct is council would be satisfied that some progress is happening, whether or not we are on the verge of submitting a detailed ordinance or not.
I appreciate that. So thank you on that.
Going back to the other question, I think another recent, I don't suggest this is definitive because we're still working through these projects, but also for the first time, staff is reviewing 2 proposals that are seeking use of the 900% premium as currently exists. So that suggests to me that that at least at a level enough for these investors to go through the rigorous process of submitting a site plan and doing their pro forma analysis, that at least in that framework, there's also market viability to achieve the premium as provided. In addition to reaching out to potential property owners or trying to vet that, maybe one of the things we could do is try and sync this approach to what those proposals would require now under the 900% premium, just as a benchmark as well.
That would be very helpful, and I'm grateful for that. And that explanation provides valuable context, and I feel more comfortable about the numbers, so thank you. That conversation does, your reference to Lockwood prompts another conversation around payment in lieu, just because they are a specialty affordable housing developer. They have infrastructure to build, or to get low-income tax credits, which is tough to do, right? That takes expertise. Not all of the developers that we see building in our downtown have that, and the hope was that if someone didn't want to go through that process, instead they would have to give us a sum of money that we could invest in our own public housing. And I was curious where that stands.
We had a lot of staff conversation about that balance. We frankly debated it, and where we arrived and what we're presenting in this draft is we only provide the payment in lieu option for the highest density. That is, when you are, this ordinance proposes that when you are seeking those incremental steps, the 550% FAR, the 700% FAR, the ultimate goal of the city is a diverse housing, and that would mandate the provision of those units in those buildings. Once you hit that highest threshold, currently the ordinance, that's where it opens up a payment in lieu option to either provide those units on site or out, or potentially seek a payment in lieu option. I think that that tension that you described still applies to those other levels. And we struggled with that balance. However, again, sort of going back to the conversation of marketplace, our aspiration with these is that there's probably more offsetting revenue in the downtown district than maybe other areas in the city, where having the technical expertise for seeking low-income housing tax credits is probably not as critical to the affordable units in the use of the premiums as it might be in another property elsewhere, where the overall market rents might be lower comparatively and thus less robust to offset quote-unquote losses for the affordable units. So it's a long-winded way of saying I think that conflict remains for those lower units, and the recommendation that we presented was aspiring to realize more of those units in the downtown than just allowing a payment in lieu option wholesale across the board.
Fair. Fair. Yeah, I mean, I do capture the units if we can, or build the units, I should say, if we can. with the tension at the higher level, or the opportunity at the higher level, that 900, where is that in code?
It's in the proposed draft at, under the residential use premium option, you see the table that we've added at the bottom of that page, item C.
And, okay, thank you. And the resolution establishing the rate of payment, the formula for payment in lieu, would that be the same resolution for PUD?
Correct.
Okay. And we're updating those.
My understanding is the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board is in the process of
Right.
updating those numbers, and once that review is completed, I think that'll be forwarded to the City Council for your
Right.
consideration.
Okay, great. And that's supposed to be done on an annual basis, right? Sometimes it falls off, but,
Yes.
okay. So we'll be looking at these numbers annually, and hopefully with more projects popping up, because this will be integrated into the D1 and D2. There'll be more incentive to stay on that updating process, just because there'll be more and more opportunities to capture dollars for public housing.
And I aspire to advise the Planning Commission, ultimately the City Council, with the correct framework. One of the things I like about this particular structure is that it does create, I think, as Alexis did a great job summarizing, I think it creates sort of a logical building block that's a little less complex than the current residential housing. And at risk of sounding like a cop-out, there's a lot of touch points in this that we could adjust depending on our experience with it. That is, if the 15, 20% thresholds don't feel right, or they seem too easily attainable, once that structure is there, it's probably relatively easy for us to make those kind of modifications. Likewise, revisiting the annual amount, how we calculate that. Certainly, we are not going to be in the business of tracking the income. I would suggest that relying on sort of a broader source in that regard, such as HUD or MISTA, is probably worthwhile to maintain, but still reference that as a moving data point. So I just put that out there as to say, if we are finding that we are impacting the marketplace in ways that we didn't anticipate, I don't know that this framework is bad to respond to that in different ways.
Yeah, no, it's certainly simplified, and I was glad that the conversation at the working session moved in that direction. And I appreciate that more premiums are getting into the same FAR unit language as opposed to switching between square footage and FAR. I think that's just better and cleaner and more intelligible. So thank you for that as well. Getting to three other areas, other potential solutions to bring down cost and incentivize construction of affordable housing. Can we go over parking? Okay. 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 Height?
Just
Yeah.
one note on the parking. The calculation would still be there, so I want to recognize it could be a moderate benefit. So if you do two 500 square foot affordable units, you're only potentially saving one parking space in that regard. So I just want to point that out, that I think we're still proposing that sort of framework would be the same. Once you go above the base FAR, it's 1,000 square feet. The only difference here is anything devoted to affordable units doesn't get counted into that. I just want to be clear, in some of those scenarios, if it's a handful of relatively modest units, it's probably not a substantial difference to the parking that would otherwise be required, but definitely recognizing that when you're making this commitment, we're not tacking on additional costs for that.
Understood. What's the, so for all of our D1 and D2 districts, do we calculate parking required by square footage rather than unit? The logic there being it captures bedroom count as well?
The logic being that in the downtown districts, you could build a residential building, but then 10 years from now, you could convert it
Got
to
it.
office.
It's all mixed use by its nature. Understood. Okay. Okay. I understand this. Okay. Moving to height, 900 FAR will always exceed our 180-foot height limit, and that's been a pain point in achieving use of the affordable housing premiums we have on the books now. Any conversation around height limit and the ability to go above 180 feet?
Alexis, tell me if I'm mistaken on this. My recollection was that we recognize that. We think that the height limitation is a real limiting factor to realizing FAR premium, probably more generally than just the 900%. It probably not only challenges 900% FAR, but it probably challenges creativity in massing buildings to some extent. I think to some extent it contributes to, when you hear anecdotally from people that buildings look the same, I think that FAR and that height cap are contributing to that. We did discuss potentially height premiums, if you will, when invoking this. Our sense was that it frankly seems to be probably a bit of a touch point in the community, and probably worthy of a broader discussion about design and massing of buildings. And I guess my instinct is I just don't know if we could get to a resolution and some sense of consensus on that. In the same time, we could come up with some other recommendations to realize more affordable
So
units.
the idea would be keep the 180 feet for, I'll just use the 900 FAR for example now. So the maximum affordable housing, we'll keep the height limit, but there's still means to go above the 180 feet because you would have to. There's no way you can get that massing.
Well, one of the things we talked about, we have the mechanism to do that now through planned projects, but one of
Right.
the things we talked about, I think, was if you are going to the 900% by the affordable housing, we would give you an additional 20 feet. I forget what dimension we were talking about. There was a sweet spot we were looking at.
We played around with both, like 12 feet per floor.
Yeah.
We played around with either 12 feet or 24 feet to give you 1 or 2 stories. We played around with, I think we came up with 20%, a 20% height bonus, and I think that when you are at 150 feet height limit, that 20% would give you 15 feet. No, it's 10%. But maybe it was a 10% bonus. But some districts have a 150-foot height limit. Some districts have 180. We had a scenario once where you don't count the height of the floor. You just magically remove it if you had affordable housing on that floor. But a variety of scenarios, and they all, Brett mentioned, seemed like biting off a bigger chunk of the apple than it was worth at this juncture.
Okay.
So
Can
we have ideas,
Sure.
and we chose to address them at a different time.
Okay. That's fair. Can you help me understand what the pain point is around the height limit? So if in order to achieve a planned project, the vote count doesn't change. It's still 6-vote majority at the city council table. However, it does create some discretion. How much discretion does it create? Because as I understand it, there are pretty finite criteria by which a planned project can be evaluated, and those involve a public benefit, and it would be a public benefit directly linked to the increase in height, and it could be pretty easily argued that adding affordable housing is a public benefit directly linked to the increased height.
the plan project has specific criteria by which you can provide flexibility on dimensional standards. And so one of them is affordability. That is one of the things we're looking at with a couple of projects right now that are seeking that 900%. They're seeking some height modification, I think at least one project, perhaps both. And one of the things that we're trying to have to interpret as part of that is what portion of that affordability do you get 200% FAR? And should those same units also give you the ability to exceed the height requirement? But generally the pinch point is that realizing the full 900% within the height limit, you just run into a building envelope challenge, trying to build in all of your required stairways, which don't count your elevator shafts potentially, and unless your floors become so unrealistically scrunched, either somewhere between undesirably or not meeting code requirements, it's just difficult to achieve, let alone try to achieve it in a creative massing way where it doesn't end up in a very rectangular block.
Right.
I would only add that in broader, high-level terms, pinch point for plan projects, as opposed to premiums, which are very quantitative. Even we have the percentages proposed, but even then, you provide, for every square foot of residential you provide, you can earn 0.75 square feet of bonus floor area. Strict formula. You meet it, you get that. The plan projects, there are, I think, 9, but there are a certain number of amenities, public benefits, that's the phrase in that section, public benefits, that if you provide those, you may be awarded a dimensional flexibility. And it says affordable, for example, it says affordable housing is one of the public amenities, but it doesn't say how much. And there is concern, but it also says solar orientation and energy conserving design. But it doesn't say how much, and I believe the anecdotal evidence from the developer's side is, I don't know if 15% is enough to get me that. I don't know where the line is. How much do I have to propose, and to get that plan project modification? So I think that's some of the issue and the hesitation on the development community to go down the plan project road is, although the category of amenities is outlined, where the bar is or where the line in the sand is discretionary.
So is it your, yeah.
Sorry. And this is anecdotal, but we're also starting to hear from petitioners just a concern about plan projects and plan unit developments that I think there's a perception in the development community and those acting in it, designers, that discretionary proposals are pretty tricky in the city right now. We have, as a community, we have a lot of goals that we're trying to aspire to, sustainability and affordability, and we are starting to hear feedback from folks that are saying that they are very purposefully not seeking those types of discretionary approvals because there's a risk associated with taking on these projects and designing the buildings and going forward. And it's a leap for somebody to make that level of investment, assuming one of those discretionary approvals, and get to the end and not have it. And so certainly that's something that I aspire through an upcoming master plan process, is to really focus what our goals are and reflect our ordinance requirements to make sure that we're trying to get as many of them as we can. But I just add that as a layer that we are definitely getting that feedback at the staff level, that is a barrier to using some of these tools that might otherwise help us respond to some of those challenges.
Okay. So if we look to, thank you. If we look to the first 2 tiers, if you would, of these 3, the 550 and the 700, it's likely that those would continue to be by right. You could get to the 700 within the height limit, most likely.
Yeah.
And those are the ones for which we're going to look and have an expectation that they build the units because there's no payment in lieu. So then
fewer units, but yeah.
Fewer units. Yeah. Fewer units, both market rate and affordable. So, but then kind of the situation that we have on our hands for that kind of super premium, the 900 FAR, looks pretty similar to what we have on the ground today. That piece isn't going to change. Will the unit ratio change, market rate to affordable?
I think that's a benchmark that we have to do. That's a good
Yeah, okay.
question. I think this would probably result in more units, but I'm not,
So
I'd want to do that comparison.
So it sounds like the standard product we see today will hopefully result in more affordable units integrated into them. The super premium that we haven't seen will still be an option and look very similar to what it looks like today.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that. I'm relatively comfortable with that. I would love to be in a situation where we would be willing to say you can have one more floor in order to achieve the, an extra 60 units of affordable housing. I guess I would err on the side of let's include it and we can always trim it back if that's the direction of conversation.
We're happy to explore it, yeah. We're
Okay.
Just, I mean, as I said, we looked at it, we were struggling with inclusion and finding the right balance. I think ultimately the product that you see here is the vast majority of premium applications is in that 700 and below. And so I think we thought, what are the policy changes in that range where most of the development seems to be happening that we could achieve some of those? And so that was definitely the focus here. But
Okay.
absolutely, we're happy to come back with alternatives, ideas.
Obviously, I'm only one member of this commission and I'm one member of city council. I would like to, put forward what we believe would allow for the most affordable housing to be built downtown. And if there's, if that needs to be trimmed back at a later date, I'd rather have the opportunity to have that conversation and trim it back. I don't think there's harm in that. I'm interested in colleagues' perspectives as well, but I don't think there's harm in that. As long as we can be ready with a tangible means to trim it back and not lose the whole benefit that we see here. Throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Okay, and I promised 2 more questions. Sorry.
If I could just jump in one
Yeah.
more time. You've mentioned by right a couple times, and I want to be clear. I think Alexis did a good job, but I just want to be absolutely crystal clear. The way the premiums are now, there's no discretion. If you provide, you get.
Right.
That would be the same here. So when you're talking about by right at 400%, you're actually talking about by right up to 900% given these conditions. So I think, again, Alexis did a good job. The plan project says, under these sorts of provisions, you may get some flexibility on dimensional standards. There's a level of discretion there. Once premiums are currently in the ordinance and as they're proposed, there is not discretion.
Right.
If A, then B.
Right.
So I just want to be clear on that.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, I was. If I wasn't clear, I was including the 550 and the 700 in by right as well. But thank you for the clarification. All right, finishings were also a topic of conversation about would we be comfortable, allowing the designated affordable units to have more standard economy grade finishings, not luxury finishings like granite and stainless steel, in order to get more affordable units. Did staff contemplate that?
The Ordinance Revisions Committee was comfortable without, if you notice, there's no size limit, there's no size on any unit, affordable or market rate. Current ordinance has a 600 square foot size for affordable unit, and there's no specificity on finishes, meaning giving as much opportunity to the provider to set that level and set that construction cost.
Okay. Thank you. And then can we turn to unlikely scenarios? So these feel like loopholes. It feels like you could, and I mean, I think you're building an office building and you're providing, 2 units of housing, one of which is affordable in order to get a lot more density you wouldn't otherwise get. Your example of the 900 FAR, obviously the discretion of the planned project would kick in, and there'd be some dialogue amongst elected officials about whether or not it's fair and we want to incentivize office to that degree. Is there any way to, I mean, is there any way to avoid this? Is this just the nature of a mixed-use downtown zoning district? How do we, this seems like just such a, it seems like a loophole, and it seems like there should be some easy way to fix it, but that could very well not be the case.
We could add thresholds for, not code language, I won't dictate in code style, but we could add thresholds like, when half of the floor area is residential and 15% of all units are affordable. We could add some upper or lower thresholds, or when no more than a third of the building is office or something.
Sure.
So thresholds could be added, as.
Could we make that non-residential? I mean, my preference would be, could we make that non-residential as opposed to specify office or hotel or?
Some,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, pick your term, pick your threshold, but thresholds could be added. We discussed it a little bit, and in our premium evaluation that was done a couple years ago, our much more robust process, incentivizing office was almost made the cut. And so as staff, we thought, well, let's see where it goes. We don't think that we're gonna get someone doing this unlikely scenario, but maybe if they did, maybe it wouldn't be an all bad thing. We would get another thing that we're not seeing downtown, which is substantial office. But that is not the purpose of this amendments. So it's for discussion. We can tighten that up. We can put in thresholds, but that would be another complication. That would be another criteria and hurdle to achieve.
Yeah. So
it is it is a matter of preference.
Well, like for a hotel, for example, I don't know how unlikely that is, right? Like I think of the Graduate, that's probably what, like 700 FAR-ish, maybe a little less?
That's much more.
That's more, okay.
Yeah. But
If I were a developer of a hotel of that scale, why wouldn't I take advantage of this?
But just for point of argument and
Yeah.
discussion, what would be so bad about another hotel downtown?
Well, we have existing zoning code to allow hotel at our current densities that allow them to take advantage of other premiums. This is utilizing a tool that is meant to increase the amount of affordable housing in order to build a massive hotel, while only providing 1 unit of affordable housing.
Yeah. And that would be the counterpoint.
Okay. So I'd be interested.
But now you're
in
not getting
thresholds.
any affordable units with that hotel.
What's that?
Now you don't get any affordable units with that hotel.
Yeah.
You have the provisions to accommodate it, but you are not getting any affordable housing as part of that development.
But it's also within the bounds that our community has set for what we think is okay in terms of massing. I don't know. I'm interested to hear what other people think. I've asked a lot of questions, so I'll leave it there for now. I may come back on a couple. Oh wait, I'm sorry. Why? I'm sorry. I feel passionately about this one. So I read it in the table as percentage of dwelling units, and then the calculations are square footage for unlikely scenarios here.
I thought that was more the unlikely scenarios, but if you see, the first one is 100% affordable. In the 550, in the unlikely 550,
Mm-hmm.
they meet the criteria. This was just to exaggerate how much of office
Mhm.
relative, because this meets the criteria. It's 100% all the units provided it's 100%. And this unit is tiny compared to the rest of the FAR.
Got it. Oh,
It
okay.
was, the square footage here was illustrative only.
Got it. Oh, totally understood. All right, thank
To
you.
make it seem as horrible as possible.
I am now officially done for now.
Are you sure? Are you positive? All right. Commissioner Weatherby.
So, I always, I don't like comparing Ann Arbor to other cities, because I think we miss things in that comparison. But, I think it is illustrative to, just have sort of an idea. And so I looked up Boulder, which I have relatives in Boulder, I go there a lot, definitely has height restrictions. Boulder requires all new residential development to provide 25% of the total dwelling units as permanently affordable. Of that, 80% should be at the low to moderate level and 20% at the sort of 80% AMI. So, and that's no premiums at all. So that's just straight up 25%. And if it's for sale, it has to be 50% on site. So to give an idea, so that to me seems so much more than what we are looking at even for premiums. We know people say a lot that they don't like height. If we are going to go with what people want, if we are going to add height, which FAR pretty much is, then I agree with Mr. Haber. I mean, maybe we need more than this. If we're, we're looking at, for premiums, something that other communities are looking at as just straight what you have to provide. So to me, this seems kind of low for a premium, and it doesn't necessarily speak to our community. We say that we want affordable housing. I don't know if that's true in the actual, building of developments, but it just seems to me that this is kind of low. So I would prefer a higher number if we're going to give premiums.
Commissioner Trudeau.
I have a list. First, I had some math questions. On the example, not this one, but the one that looked like this one, I think I'm not understanding the math. So looking at the 900% FAR at 30%, 30% of 60 is 18, and this says 9 units. Am I missing something?
I could have a typo.
Lisa, Commissioner Sauvé, sorry.
Payment in lieu, 50% offsite.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay, so with that just didn't represent the payment in lieu. Okay, so I was wondering, yeah, that was my first math question. And let's see, what else did I have? I think getting to, I sort of, the unlikely scenarios one was the first thought I had when I saw this proposal. And that does seem like a big loophole to me. And I think that the biggest challenge here is we are sort of using a percentage of units as the trigger, but then we're providing floor area, and units and floor area aren't the same thing. And so that's how you get all these weird scenarios that don't exactly meet what I think our expectations would be. And I've been sitting here kind of trying to think of other ways we could get to what we want that wouldn't create the same kind of loopholes. I don't know if I have any specific proposals, but I'm going to be stewing on that one. But one idea would be as a percentage of the total floor area. So it's like if it's the number of the amount of floor area you're dedicating to affordable units as a percentage of the total floor area that isn't. And then going from there, I don't know if that's something that would work or not, or if you evaluated it. Again, I'm thinking about this now. I don't know if there's a good solution there, but it doesn't quite feel right, and maybe there's not a good solution there. And can I ask, did you consider a formula that was more based in floor area or not in staff discussions? And is there any sort of highlights on why that could work or not work?
Sure. We discussed with the Ordinance Revisions Committee three approaches. The first was based on the sort of the exact current model, and which is for every square foot of residential use that is provided, 0.75 square feet of bonus floor area is awarded. And using that and just inserting, and 15% of all units must be affordable. We also considered working with the super premium language as sort of a second approach, which that language currently says for every affordable dwelling unit that you provide, you get 3,000 square feet as a chunk. And we discussed that, and Commissioner Sauvé is much better at percentages than I am, but percentage-wise, and that requires a 600 square foot unit, and then you get a 300 square foot for a chunk. And it just didn't seem like that was not the approach that the committee would like to take. And then the third approach was this format of, this is what we want, this is what we want, and this is what you'll get. Like I said, based on the green building premium. The green building premium says if you are LEED gold, you can add 50%. If you are LEED silver, you can add 150%. And if you're LEED platinum, you can add 250%. And it was the Ordinance Revisions Committee who favored this approach, also thinking and also wanting to more try to compare apples to apples. Every square foot of affordable housing is just as valuable as every square foot of market rate, and vice versa. Every square foot of market rate is just as valuable. So we did consider sticking with the FAR approaches, and in the end, it was the Ordinance Revisions Committee who chose this approach.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm uncomfortable with the loophole effect, and another unlikely scenario is we get a lot of giant, expensive units, and then a bunch of 250 square foot units, which a bunch of 250 square foot units would be great to have because we're not getting those now, but it does feel a little off balance to me. But this is a tough one to figure out because it's coming up with a general formula for a lot of different cases is tricky, especially, and we're not talking about 100% residential, in which case I think this would work pretty easily.
One thing I say that the Ordinance Revisions Committee kept coming back to was the purpose of premiums is to articulate what you want and then provide a carrot to get it. And it was pretty clear that what we want are affordable units in the building, and our 15, 20, and 30% seemed like good goals. Separate conversation whether they should each be doubled. But again, the purpose of the premiums, I think the Ordinance Revisions Committee sort of decided we might not get too far into the weeds about the minutia, in favor of we can articulate what we want. They wanted 15% of all the units in the building to be affordable. We are not seeing any projects where that is occurring now, and certainly not 20% or 30%. And then that is what we want, and we are willing to just increase the FAR to get that. And then if developers are providing smaller units, that was okay. If developers are getting bigger units and even more luxury units, but the consensus was that was okay because we are achieving our goal of realizing affordable units in the downtown, and it was deemed an acceptable trade-off. I'd be happy to discuss other approaches or thresholds and.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how hard I want to push on that because if we have a workable framework that we can move forward with, that's better than nothing. That's just one thing that I'm like, I can see a lot of ways that this might be gamed, and I'm not sure the framework is going to be easily fixable if we are really getting stuff we don't like. Maybe it won't. I think it's unlikely, but I think it's maybe not as unlikely as we think because the holes are pretty big. All right, I'm gonna keep thinking about that one. Another question I had was on the table that shows the 3 tiers. When I first read this, it wasn't immediately clear to me how those added together. It seemed to me that they were more, when I first read this, my interpretation was essentially 15% gets me 150 and 30% gets me 500. Is that, oh, that is right. Okay, never mind. So I'm not adding in the 400 that you also get. Okay, never mind. I just answered my own question. That did throw me for a little bit of a loop, because everything else was referring to the 550 and 900 and 700 number. I don't, maybe it would make sense to include the additive there just to make it clear, or maybe it's clear enough in the code. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that would be easy enough.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, talk about this. I wanted to talk about parking. It wasn't in the packet, the parking piece of the amendment, I noticed.
It was not in the packet.
So just so I understand this, so when we're saying the affordable housing square footage isn't counted, like is it, I'm not sure if that's clear enough on what that actually means when we're doing the numbers, because are we subtracting that from the total square footage of the building before we look at how much is the premium area, or is it like, it wasn't clear what the affordable housing square footage gets subtracted from in order to get the final number that we're considering premium area that then triggers parking. And this is probably something similar to height, where it might be better to deal with it separately and in the future, but I'm of the opinion that we probably don't need any parking minimum for any residential use, even if it's exercising the premiums. I think you could make the argument for other uses that it makes sense, but for residential use, given the parking patterns and the fact that, you know, it's easy to get a limited parking permit downtown already if you need your car during the day and you just need a place to put it at night, and it just drives up costs of affordability overall. Like, I would advocate just removing any requirement of residential use from parking. Now, whether we want to take that bite at the apple with this ordinance, I don't know, but I think it would make a lot of sense. And be curious if anybody else has anything to say about that. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention, sort of on the, like, are these percentages big enough? I do like the idea of having this framework that we can tweak, and I do think there's a risk of when you set the bar too high, then you get nothing. And I mean, other cities have seen that, where they set their mandatory inclusionary zoning limits high, and then their pipeline goes dry. Nobody builds anything because nothing works financially. So we can demand all day that people build something, but if it's not going to work financially, then nobody's going to build it. And so I like having a framework that we can adjust. And I don't know, I'm pretty comfortable with where the numbers are at now, but that would be just something I would also warn us about, to think about. And last question. So what was I don't remember when I first downloaded the packet, but was were the amendments all online in Legistar ahead of time? I think I got the email late last week.
Yes,
Okay.
Friday.
So
It would have been available for downloading on Friday.
Okay, so that was available online. I know Epi said she had trouble locating the details, so maybe that's an offline conversation to help figure out how to help people find the details that were there. Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Briggs.
I'm just gonna, for the most part, agree with different things that have been said, which is, I agree. From our discussion, just a little more clarification. We did discuss in the ORC whether or not what the likelihood of getting small units being built. Yes, we agree that they're probably going to be small units. We still think that that's valuable. We just did discuss whether or not it should be bedrooms versus units, and didn't think that bedrooms was appropriate because that could all just be stacked into one. So we were really looking for units, but regardless of the fact that they're likely to be small, we didn't necessarily see that as troubling. Though obviously it'd be nice if it was a more diverse set. But With regards to loophole, we didn't really get to that discussion, and I do think I would concur that that seems troubling to me. So I liked your suggestion, Alexis, in terms of how to create a, an additional condition around that to hopefully not see the sort of hotel being built or all office building, because I don't really think that's the purpose of this ordinance amendment, is we're really looking for affordable housing. I hadn't really thought about the parking issue until you mentioned it, but I would agree that, I mean, if there's any place we're going to live in the community without parking, clearly it's the downtown, and if that's what's increasing cost in building affordable units, then that's something we should consider. But perhaps, given how controversial that topic is, maybe not coupling that conversation together, maybe trying to figure out, we already talked about pulling out the components of this that are the revisions to the UDC that are just, clean up. So I don't know, parking might be a discussion you would want to have separately from that as well. With regards to the height, obviously that does seem to be an issue. If we can't actually truly realize that premium, that super premium, then why are we offering it? So I do think that that is something that should be made really, at least made very clear moving forward if we don't address it, that there are these clear limitations to achieving that. I think that's it for me.
Commissioner Sauvé.
This is a fun one. So we did a lot of math and back and forth and metrics and proportion and ratios and percentages to try to figure out a balance. And I think I really appreciate the transparency of the loophole, Alexis, so just to kind of really lay out what some of the outcomes are. So a few things. One thing I wanted to ask about these percentages, for projects that we've seen either proposed or created using affordability, if we've seen them, what percentage of units in the past have we seen? We talk about like Lockwood, which is about 40% of the units, correct? What other projects in proportion of affordable units did we see in projects?
I think that the Ashley Muse PUD has something like, it has a set number, and it must be a low, I think it's a low percentage, because they have like 4 affordable units. The Broadway Village PUD that was not realized, I think, had 20% affordable housing. And then we have two applications under review right now that are using the 900% super premium, and I think we can look them up. We looked at them developing this, and they were in this ballpark that we're talking about, percentage-wise. But I can close this down. I can go look it up, those site plans right now, but there's not many data points to compare, particularly if you're going to separate out the projects done by, say, Avalon Housing, which is 100% affordable. They are experts, and that's their only thing they do. Lockwood was basically a affordable housing provider as well.
Right.
And so it may not be a fair comparison. Their percentages would be very high because that's their thing.
Mm-hmm. But 10 to 20% of some of those other projects would be around the baseline.
Yeah.
From Muse and.
I don't have it at my fingertips, but I would guess 15 and 20% would generally be a higher percentage of most of the other projects.
Okay. And I'm just looking at that in terms of, I think the Lockwood that didn't go through at 40% is outside of the downtown. So when we're talking about cost of those units and what can be covered in development, it's much different than what we can do downtown. So we're just looking at different market metrics per those units for that percentage. There was discussion at the ORC about additional payment in lieu, and instead of just at that 500% super premium. And so I think with the request and the idea of more affordable units, if we increased to approximately 25% more in both of those scales, so from 15% to 20%, 20% to 25%, and then keeping the 30%, maybe at 30%. So it's 20, 25, and 30%, but then the first two tiers being 25% payment in lieu. So that would still ensure that 15, 20, and 30%, or 15, 20, and 15% stay on site, but 20, 25, and 30% units get developed. So that way we have payment in lieu at all tiers, which I think was something that's a back and forth about what's the tipping point, what's the rationale between making it available. I think there's kind of economies of scale at that larger tier, but as the loophole shows, in every scenario, we can do 2 units and check the box. So that would actually be something I'd be interested in more discussion. If we did payment in lieu at every tier, basically maintain those percentages proposed, and that if we want to increase the numbers, we did it as a payment in lieu strategy. I think so going into the unit counts in this loophole and kind of 2 units checks all the boxes up to, 30% to the super premium. Working on projects in the downtown and thinking about market conditions generally about affordability. And if this becomes an office building with 2 units in it, if rentable office space, the rents go down, it makes businesses operate at a more affordable rate. It could increase income for those employees, which could help them afford to live in this town and increase the AMI in a way. It's a stretch. I know, there's some moving parts, but it's also we're looking at $40 a square foot for office space too. There's another affordable pressure. And for some of these buildings that do get developed, and if they build an office building and we get no affordable units, this would ensure 1. So I'm trying to play out worst case scenario, what do we get? We still get something and more of it. But there is kind of market conditions that more housing is needed, so it should get tapped into too. So it's definitely a dynamic and multivariable scenario to try to play through if this loophole will hurt or actually be activated in that way. But I feel comfortable with how it's set up, that it's adjustable in the future if there seems to be a tendency to go in that loophole direction. So that's where I stand now, is that this new framework supports change and improvement, but I don't think the loophole is set up to create failure within this ordinance. And then the last thing I have is for parking. Heard some interesting things. What I would propose is that parking count that wouldn't apply to making parking spots based on those units would be applied to the square footage in the premium, so above that 400%, to ensure that we're not borrowing from the base level, so that reduction is always applied as the FAR. So if we're not going to take the radical move of removing all residential parking requirements, at least we're making the direct move of always removing all of the square footage requirements for those affordable units as part of that premium square footage parking requirement. If that makes sense about where you kind of sever that count. So those would be kind of, I guess my clarification points are the 25% payment in lieu for the first 2 tiers to increase to 20 and 25% as a discussion point, and then where we put that premium parking calculation reduction.
Mr. Leonard, I see you've been feverishly doing some math. Would you like to make some comments?
So just doing some calculations on one of the 900% FAR proposals that we are currently evaluating right now. Based on their 900% FAR, they are proposing 8% of their units as affordable. And they're seeking a height modification of 28 feet, just for a reference.
Yeah. Commissioner Soy?
So I'll go to height real quick. I'm not sure how this could work as a premium just for the scope of work if affordable is included, but anything above the actual finished roof height, elevator, penthouses, and those sorts of conditions that are counted towards height, if those could be removed, would that help? Or like, I haven't looked into those projects specifically, but if that isn't counted towards the height, that might be something that actually helps and accommodates what the final maximum height could be, even if you start to squid, like, it could be up to 10, 12 feet right there with that elevator, penthouses, rooftop units, antenna, and those sorts of things. So that as a condition, which isn't actually buildable volume, being removed from the height calculation could support it in a way.
So I agree with a lot of comments that have been shared this evening. There are two things that I want to discuss, and one has to do more with the big picture, that we're sitting here, we're having this conversation, we're throwing out these numbers and percentages and square footage numbers, but it would be really interesting to see how the market will respond to this. Whether we're too low, whether we're too high. And so I'm a bit conflicted about moving this forward, just because part of me says, yeah, we're almost there to the finish line, but this room is empty today. And in our previous meetings when we've discussed it, it's also been fairly empty. So does it mean that no one has a problem with it, or does it mean that we're not reaching to the right individuals at this point? So I'm a little uncomfortable moving this forward because I don't know if we've gotten that feedback. And this is, it's a problem in our community. Affordable housing has been a problem for a long time. And I don't want to act too hastily on it just because City Council has given us a date to respond to them by. If we haven't done our full due diligence and we know exactly what we're putting forth here. Because maybe these numbers are too low, maybe they're too high. I don't know if this is realistic and if developers will take advantage of this, or if we're just going to spin our wheels and actually it's going to stall what's happening in our community. So still uncertain about that, so I'd like to get some feedback whether we're at a point where we're ready for a vote or whether we want to postpone this for a little while. The other thing that I just wanted to also address, actually I have two other things. With regards to what other communities do, and I appreciate Commissioner Weatherby pulling up what Boulder does. The one thing that I'm always conscious of is the markets are substantially different. The prices that I see coming out of Boulder when I talk to other real estate professionals in that market is by far way different than what we see here. So I'd like to see more of their numbers as well in all of this, just so that we can do a comparison with regards to where their affordability numbers are and what does 80% of AMI mean to them versus what it means to us. And then the other piece I just want to throw out there, and I've thrown this out before, also looking at affordable housing outside of downtown. We currently have no carrots for developers outside of downtown to do affordable housing. So this is not part of this motion, but this is a conversation that we should also be having, and maybe City Council will ask us to look into that. So those are my comments, and I will, Commissioner Ackerman.
Thanks. I also agree. I don't think we're quite there. And if Mr. Leonard is comfortable sending to City Council just a status report for the next council meeting, I think that's appropriate. I was the one who came up with the July 1st deadline. And I think we are at a point where I'm glad we've picked up this momentum. That was the intent of the deadline, but I would rather have something we're all comfortable with. I do think that some more stakeholder engagement would be helpful. I would love for a development professional to look at these numbers and in as objective of a way as possible, because it's always, you always have to wonder about bias, but in as objective of a way as possible, give us a read of what the effect on the market would be. And kind of, I think, polling from multiple sources might be helpful in that. And I guess I'd leave it to staff to figure out the best way to do that. So I certainly would want to see a postponement for that reason, and then also now quote-unquote loopholes conversation, as well as consideration of the height as something that can be kind of bolted on now and removed if conversation later dictates it should be. Those were the 3 areas that I identified needed a little bit more work.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Yeah, I just used Boulder as an example, but, I mean, Boulder straight up has a 4-story height limit, so, you know, it's not the same kind of situation. But I would like to see maybe some benchmarking of other cities in Michigan or other, just maybe some idea. And again, I know every place is different, but I think it gives maybe some idea of what other communities are doing. I don't know, maybe it doesn't make sense, but we are, developers who come here are in other communities also, and, you know, what is Chicago doing? What is, I mean, again, we are not Chicago, but just some idea, because I feel like we're kind of making up numbers and just figuring out what maybe works, and that's good, but I don't think we're getting a lot. So maybe having some idea about other communities that are getting affordable housing, what they're using.
Commissioner Briggs.
So I also agree a postponement would be useful, primarily from my perspective, to deal with the unlikely scenarios issue. I am much less concerned about the 15, 20, 30%. I think that, I mean, it's great if staff can get some additional feedback, or perhaps just further articulate from my perspective exactly how the numbers were justified. I don't see this to be a huge issue. The reality is that they can be tweaked if they are too low or too high, where the unlikely scenario, I think, is much more, from my perspective, if you see something being built, if you see a developer come forward and present a project and use the affordable housing sort of premium to present a building that's much bigger than we would previously have allowed, that sort of feels like something that's taking advantage of our code. So that's why I don't want to see that. But I also think, as I'm reading sort of the proposals from the, one of the reasons I'm not so concerned as well is I think that as we're updating our master plan, one of the things that I'm seeing in some of the proposals is that we are looking for a better housing analyses and stuff like that. And so we'll have that data, much better data to look at within this next year. So we could come back to this when we get that, and we could potentially ask I don't know if Mr. Leonard agrees with this, but, we could ask for feedback on this specifically as well to see if these numbers seemed accurate. But in the effort to not stall this too much with getting better data, if this feels about right, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't move forward on this.
Yeah, we can definitely try to bring some of that benchmark information, some comparisons. We can try to get some feedback. I just ran a quick calculation of the other petition that's seeking the 900% currently. They are not proposing any height increase over the current height limit, and the units they're proposing would be at 11%. So we would definitely be increasing the requirement at the 900% level in addition to the lower thresholds.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Yeah, I think that added data, and thanks for the live benchmarking, that's really helpful. I mean, we'd be tripling, and right, obviously they're not working to an apples to apples requirement right now, but if they were, we'd be, tripling the requirement. I think that just emphasizes the need for the height allowance, just because if we are going to be creating a much greater, I don't want to say burden, bear with me. If we're decreasing the amount of revenue they could capture at this kind of density, then we should reduce their risk, I guess is what I would say. So I think that the fact that it's a tripling of what we're seeing right now in our current state, yeah. illustrates why the height allowance would be needed. And thank you. Last night was a long night, so I stumbled through that sentence, but I think I got there.
So, Commissioner Trudeau.
One last thing, so, and I'm hesitant to even bring this forward because I know the ORC had a lot of conversation about this, I'm sure staff did too, on the, going back to the loophole issue. I was just playing around with numbers on FAR calculations, and if we set, so anyway, this is an idea, and maybe you can all just discard it and say it's too complicated to consider at this point, but taking the percentage of floor area dedicated to affordable housing in the fully realized FAR and then kind of working backwards to get the premium, like, is it like, and it's difficult to explain, which is why I think it's complicated, but so as an example, if somebody was shooting for the 700% total FAR, which right now we're saying 20% of units, if you took 20% of the floor area instead, that would be about 140% of the FAR of the total 700 would have to be, could be dedicated to affordable. So instead of having the units, just have it be floor area. That sort of, it's actually probably more than what we'd get in units because the units can all be small. That might be another way to think about how we calculate it, how you represent that in the ordinance. I'm not sure yet. Does that make sense? And is that something that we've already tried to represent and doesn't work or we discarded? And I like this idea because like when we talk about other uses, you still get a bonus, right? So you get 140% has to be affordable housing in that particular calculation, but your bonus is 300, so you're getting 160% more FAR that you can do whatever you want with. And so if you're doing a hotel, like if you want another 160% FAR, and then you throw the 140 affordable housing FAR on top of that, then you kind of get to the 700. And then we're not talking about units, so we don't get these weird loophole considerations. It's a pretty smooth formula. I don't know, like that anyway, I just wanted to push back on that because it feels more.
Under that scenario, would you be concerned that the affordable units are 6-bedroom and the market rate units are studios?
Not so much, because I feel like unless I would have to look at what the sort of the AMI rent targets look like, but I think with affordable units, given the way the rents work out, actually we're probably going to still get more smaller units because they're collecting rents on those units, and so the rent per square footage from a financial perspective probably works out better for more smaller units than bigger units.
So I make sure I understand the concept. Would be switching the language that is currently 15% of all the residential units are affordable, then you get a chunk. And so you're saying that if 15% of the building is devoted to affordable dwelling units, then you can get 150%. If 20% of the floor area of the total building is a dedicated affordable units, then you would get 300%. And if 30% of the entire building, and that just like, regardless of the numbers, is that the concept? Is that the concept?
That's the concept, and I was backing it out so it would hit the same sort of 700, 900, 550 marks with those percentages. Like, I'm like, if you maxed it out, like how much floor area would you have to get 20% of 700? That's how I did the math, and I think if you described it the other way, it would work out that way, but that's what I haven't reasoned through yet, is how you could write the ordinance to make it a little clearer. But yes, I think that's the general idea. So if you're going to build a 700% instead of a 400% building, you'd have to give 20% of the floor area. But if you gave a little less,
well, is it 20% of the floor area of the bonus, or 20% of the building? Okay, of the building. Okay.
That's how I did the math, and I think the numbers might need a little tweaking to get, because I think they move around a little bit by working on floor area instead of unit based on the ratios, but it's pretty close actually, like if you work with the 15, 20, 30. But anyway.
And then the example scenarios, if I run it.
Yeah, you can run example scenarios to see what happens out of that. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If you build a model, then you can like get a few examples and then just like run them and see what they look like. But yeah, if I didn't have a day job, I'd be firing up my spreadsheet in the morning to figure this out. But
Commissioner Sauvé.
So what I'm hearing, just to kind of reference kind of one of the conditions from the ORC, or one of the previous residential premium uses was 0.75 square feet of floor area in excess to regular floor area allows 1 square feet to use for residential. And so, right, like it's like a 75% premium sort of thing, and there could be also a baseline with this 15, 20, and 30% affordability that would just say, of the premium FAR, 75% must be residential use. And then of that 75%, 15% needs to be dwelling. Like I'm also trying to like simplify it in a way that these are easier boxes to check and adjust so that the kind of notching up goes away, and so it's clear for staff and developers to know what they're getting, and just kind of 3 boxes. So that would be another way to skin the cat.
It doesn't seem simple, though. So you're saying you'd get 300%, 75% of that has to be housing, and 25% of the 75%?
So you get, so we're talking about like 20%, right?
Yeah.
You get 300% in D1. 75% of that is residential.
So you get 300% if 75% of it is residential.
75% of it is residential, and 20% of that is affordable.
So it's 20% of the 75%.
Yes.
Okay.
Now we talk numbers, and it's more
Yeah.
numbers.
And if I may, like, the thing I don't like about that is it doesn't give us as big an incentive to get housing with other uses. If we wanted to see a bigger mixed use kind of, like if we wanted to see like a hotel plus residential, like versus a simpler, like just like percentage of the floor area, like you get the housing, which maybe that would be a good question for developers. So maybe nobody's going to build like 60%, office, 30% affordable housing building just to get a little bit more office. I don't know. Or maybe that's a case where payment in lieu makes more sense. Sorry, I didn't mean to unload all of these things that have been already kind of gone over. But.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I suggest a postponement of to the first meeting in July in order to accomplish 4 things?
Well,
Oh, sorry.
actually,
No
what I
meeting.
was thinking is that we would just delete a part of the motion, just because half of it is good to go, I think. We haven't had any discussion that it wouldn't be approved. So I was thinking that we'd delete it.
Separate out the
and
correction.
Then staff would bring it back when.
I'm okay with separating out the connection. Mr. Leonard, when do you think you could accomplish 4 things as I hear them? One, a little bit of feedback about the numbers we've developed, the adding language on height allowance for the 900 FAR tier, the thresholds for the loopholes, and then I guess the 4th may be interrelated to the loopholes, but the line of conversation that Commissioner Trudeau and Sabe were just engaging in about a potential solution to close that.
And also
and parking.
dialogue with development community.
That was the first item.
No, so,
That was the feedback. Yeah.
I'm thinking we'd probably want maybe shoot for the first meeting in August.
Second meeting in July seems pretty good. I'm just kidding. I'll defer to you.
What do you think, Alexis?
Well, it's hard to say.
Well,
And I
let's
don't
do
know,
this.
should
Let's schedule it for the second meeting in July, and we will either come with all the answers or some of the answers.
That seems reasonable.
The only thing I would say, like, it's pretty robust discussion. Would a working session be helpful?
The first working session in July?
How about next week?
How about next week?
The only piece is we won't have feedback from the development community
Yeah.
by that point.
We could try to
Um,
invite some folks to that working session.
Yeah,
Let me see
Yeah.
what we can put together for that, or, so let's, I guess I would ask for the flexibility to, we may schedule a working session to discuss this collaboratively with you. At worst, we will do our best to bring all of that feedback back at the second July meeting, for it'll either be it'll either presenting it for recommendation or another touch point.
that sounds great.
And then in the meantime, I'll update, the city council on our progress.
Thank you very much. So do you want a motion to separate the two items?
Yes.
All right, I'd make a motion to separate the two items and take the first one now.
Okay, do you have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Trudeau. Any discussion on approving changes to section 5.17.4, the mixed-use zoning district dimensions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And then,
I
Ackerman?
move to postpone the second item to the second meeting in July.
seconded by Commissioner Trudeau. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It is postponed. Thank you. That was a great discussion. Now we're on to approval of Planning Commission subcommittees and designees. And maybe that's not the right title for that?
No, but since it was not titled correctly, I guess I would recommend we don't take action, so for the next meeting, I can present your work plan.
Okay. Do I have a commissioner who will move postponement on that item? Moved by Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Ackerman. Any discussion on that postponement? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission about anything at all? If so, please step up to the podium, state your name for the record, and you have up to 3 minutes to address us.
Hi, Karen White, 2857 Packard is what's on my mind. You're going to be talking about the PUD proposal. I can tell you that my take on their PUD proposal is that it's unacceptable. It does not preserve the forest fragment that's there. It does not address the historic property that's there, the historic house. And I think it's the wrong development for that very unique parcel. And we can't afford to raise that lot and lose all the benefits that already exist there. And I don't see any benefits to the PUD proposal. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wishing to address the Planning Commission? Seeing no one, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Trudeau. I saw a hand come. All those in favor, or we're adjourned. Thank you.